Hey everyone, it's Eric Mintel. Welcome to Eric Mintel Investigates. My guest today is Reverend Michael Carter. He's originally from Baltimore, Maryland, but moved to New York City in 1980, lived there for about 27 years working as a professional actor before moving to North Carolina. Michael's an ordained interfaith minister, receiving his BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle. Michael's an anti-racism trainer and has been recognized by former President Bill Clinton for his efforts. He's also a longtime UFO contactee, and his book Alien Scriptures was on the #1 Amazon bestseller list in 2014. Michael is also a consultant on ancient aliens as well as history's greatest mysteries, and you'll see him in that episode about the Phoenix Lights. Michael, thank you so much for being here today, man.
It's good to be here. I've been looking forward to it too. So this is wonderful, man.
And we just said, it's like I talked to you the other day when I asked you about this interview, and I felt like, you and I knew each other for years.
Yeah. Again, it was just an ease, a connection. And that's what it is with friends. I mean, you can well, even I guess lifetimes, but you can see a friend and you may not hear from he or she for 3 weeks, 3 months.
Right.
And when you get back together, you just start from where you left off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you are doing you're one of those cats that are doing so many great things for humanity out there, man.
Oh,
I looked at your bio and everything that you've done and you continue to do. I basically like to start out these interviews like, I guess 2 questions. Like, what was the fire in the belly to basically, become a reverend and be a minister? And tell us about your upbringing. Tell us a little bit about where you came from and how this journey led you to here.
Well, great questions. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up, my parents they were in the military, and they stayed in the military, but as civilians, they both worked for the government. Very religious. I was brought up in the Baptist tradition.
Okay.
And everything that went along with that, the pros and the cons. But I loved religion. And so my fire in the belly was when I was a kid, I wanted to be a priest. I just knew it. Now, with some past life stuff, I figured out that I had done this before, but it was just very comfortable with, and I'm talking about healthy religion. I'm not talking about what we're having now, even though the Baptist tradition was still us versus them, saved and not saved. But like any child, you want to please your parents. But I genuinely, of course, they were beaming that our son loves church, but I that was genuine. It wasn't just trying to get their approval, at least not on a conscious level. I mean, I just enjoyed it. I had a brother, a stepbrother, but he was murdered back in '95. He was robbed and they killed him anyway. My parents are retired, and I went to New York City to become Denzel Washington. I was in the theater. That was my idol. But and it was a great life. Being in the theater in New York, but it was a hard life in the sense of you got to keep auditioning. You got to keep, even big stars were auditioning, and I was nowhere near that level. But I get a pension. It's small, but I get a pension from the actors union. But my point being is just that I wanted to serve. And I said, do I want to do this the rest of my life? Because it's a very self-absorbed profession. I don't mean that as a critique, but it is.
Sure.
And I wanted to help. I wanted to, and in that profession, until you make it, you're constantly trying to keep your head above water.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Yeah. One show closes, another one opens.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I left the theater. I left the theater. The skills that I learned on, as an actor, I brought them to my ministry, getting in front of people, public speaking, how to deliver a message. And so it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. But you know how life is. Kierkegaard said life is lived forward, but it's only understood backwards. So I thought I was going to do one thing, but I wound up doing something else, going back to what I wanted to do. And so that's how that journey began.
Looking for a vacation home? Look no further. Will Nicholson, the real estate pro, has just what you're looking for. World-class entertainment at Schweitzer Mountain or water sports at Lake Pend Oreille. Idaho has it all. Fresh powder skiing, live music, multiple restaurants, and downhill biking in the summer. And if you're lucky, you might spot Bigfoot. He loves it here. Give Will a call today. I wanted to ask you about this too, because not a lot of people are familiar with UFO contactee. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Well, that was the game changer for me, because I did not believe in all this stuff, man. I mean, I swallowed the Baptist thing, hook, line, and sinker. And I want to be clear, I respect that tradition. It just didn't work for me anymore. And so before I started having my visitations, um, I was already leaving the fold, if you will. I was studying metaphysics and going to metaphysical churches. I was reading existential philosophy. I started reading tarot cards and using crystals for. I was already on that journey, and I know some more conservative people say, "Well, yeah, see, that's the devil that drew you away," but I didn't feel that way. Jesus, for instance, means a lot to me as a brother, as an example.
Mhm.
But my own theology, there's any God that was in him was in me as well and is in you. There were things when I was a kid, I always saw auras around people.
So you have like a sympathetic. You are like, would you say you're a psychic sensitive too?
I would say that I am intuitive.
Okay.
And I say that, and I do readings for people. People come and I do their tarot cards. I read their auras, but I had nothing to compare that to when I was a kid.
Right, right, right.
But I do remember I'd sit in my room and just stare, and I would see these orbs in my room, and they were different colors, like chakra colors. Now I can look, like they were green and purple, and they would just float around my room, and I would look at them, and I could see the three-dimensionality of the space in my room, like it looked like an empty space, but this orb was there. It was very bizarre, and I would wake up with blood on my pillow. And I would think my ears were bleeding. I was like, because I didn't know. And then a friend of mine, 30 years later said, well, maybe you have an implant. That was probably your nose bleeding. But I didn't, but at 8 or 9, what do I know about that?
Right, right, right.
So when I had my contact experiences, and I don't want to get up, but I have little artwork of the beings that I saw. Do
Oh,
you want
man.
to see them?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
they're right here. So, okay.
Go ahead.
December 28th, 1989, I went to see the pyramids at Chichen Itza in Tulum on in Yucatan. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we were in Mexico.
Okay.
And came back to New York, and we're there for a week, 10 days, I think. And I remember, I wanted to show off, man. I was dark and my hair had changed colors, and I was in 89 degrees. I wanted to gloat with my friends who were not.
Yeah.
And so I went to a friend's house in Hell's Kitchen. So when we got off at JFK, my girlfriend went home. I went home and went downtown while she unpacked and hung out. I've told this story before. No alcoholic beverages were served. Finger food, deviled eggs, which I love. And then I went home. And I don't know to this day whether I felt somebody in the room or whatever. I woke her up. I'm home safe. Get some sleep. I changed. And in the middle of the night, I turned around, and because I usually sleep on my stomach or on my side, and this person was there.
Wow.
And so he was chalk colored like this. I'm using the pronoun he. It could have been a she. It could have been an it. He didn't have this robe on. I had the artist do that. He had on a, just so he looked like a Buddha.
Wow.
He had on like a NASCAR suit, but it was like aluminum foil.
Oh, wow.
Tight fitting. He was about 4 feet tall at the foot of my bed, and he looked at me, And I looked at him, and my girlfriend would not wake up. Either she wouldn't or couldn't wake up. And so, um, yeah, I mean, it was heart attack time, okay?
Wow.
And around him was a blue light, like a cobalt blue, and around that was just this bright white light, like our whole bedroom was lit up. And so this is in Manhattan. It wasn't rural like Betty or Barney Hill driving on a
Right.
country road. And I got in the fetal position and pulled the covers up over my head. That's how scared I was.
Wow.
And I can't explain it, but it felt like I was outside. It felt like I had gone outside and I heard this whoosh, like this wind.
Wind.
And I was cold. And then finally I grew a pair and I pulled the covers off of me and nobody was there.
Wow.
And so I told my girlfriend about it. She's a deeply spiritual woman. We got married later on, but that was my first marriage. We're still very close friends. And she said, A, I had never seen you so scared.
Mm,
But B, when I wrote my book Initiation, shameless promotion, but this book, when I
absolutely.
wrote it, I told the whole story. And she said, and this just came out last, like 2 years ago. She said, I remember that night. And she said, I remember there was some shadowy looking beings in the room. I saw figures in the room, but I couldn't stay up. It was I couldn't keep my eyes open. And so she went to sleep. And that's what kicked it off.
So she was basically feeling the same thing because was basically like not able to consciously see what was going on, or like she saw
I,
them, she couldn't articulate.
She just said, I remember seeing beings in the room, people in the
Wow.
room. And
Wow.
I think they just put her out,
Yeah.
looking back. And so they were coming every full and new moon, the gray looking people. I would be paralyzed. Okay. And I would feel all this electricity like they were doing something to my energy. I used to feel it a lot around my throat. They showed me they never really talked to me, but they would talk to me in pictures you know, like one time they showed me a past life where I was a Catholic monk. Then they had showed me a future event that did happen. I had on a three-piece suit and I was talking, and I remember that happening years afterwards. And then I had seen these beings, the reptilians had come and
Oh,
visited
yeah.
me.
Wow.
And they walked right through the wall of the apartment that we lived in. They would always come after that time. They always came when my girlfriend at the time was not there. Her name is Sandy, and he came twice, or
Hmm.
someone who looked like him, and he didn't do anything. There was no great message. He just looked at me and put his hand on me and said, "Don't be afraid." And when he said, "Don't be afraid," his mouth did not move. It was like I had speakers in
Oh,
my head. I'm jumping around, and then this went on for about 8 months, 6, 8 months, probably close to a year. And then this person came in 2019. This is a praying mantis person. There's a story behind that. But I had a healing. This Nordic person healed a blood clot that
wow.
I had on July 4th, 2013.
Wow. Let me ask you this. When these events happened to you, did you feel you had said there was some blood on your pillow. Was there any other physical things that happened to you from each of these
Yeah.
events?
Yeah. Well, no, the blood on my pillow, I didn't know if I had been visited, but someone later on said you probably were because why am I waking up with blood on my pillow? But I didn't see, I thought my ears were bleeding, and someone suggested you may have been having nosebleeds,
And
but
that's why they keep
from an
coming.
implant. But I don't know if that's true.
I keep saying this too. I think that, in our research, and you probably will agree, is that some people are picked to experience these beings, that they came to you for some other purpose, some greater purpose. And
Mhm.
maybe this is something that is leading you to more of a greater purpose. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. I agree with you. I want to answer your first question first about the physicality. I had physiological changes, and then we'll get to purpose. My hair grew faster, my nails grew faster. I got by on much less sleep. I started doing energy healing, and every time they visited me, my energy would ramp up. Something
Wow.
had changed in my voice. People would say, "Have you been out in the sun? Have you been? Were you on vacation?" I guess because I was kind of like glowing from these visits. My heart was more open. That's the best way I could put it. I felt
Interesting.
more loving. I also felt more intelligent. For it's like my IQ. I just felt, I felt like a new person. I
Yeah.
was, but my heart was more open. I was less. I lived my life less in fear. And what you're saying, yeah, for a couple of things. Once you say to yourself that I live in a populated universe, then your whole worldview, your whole Weltanschauung, your whole perspective changes, because you have to think, then what does God mean? Why am I here? What is all of this meaning? Because I was a minister and I am a minister, and it had me, and reading the Bible very differently now.
Right.
um, you can't go back. Once you allow that in, you can't read the Bible the same way. You can't look at life the same way, and that's what happened to me. Now, when your point about, I don't know why people are chosen. I mean, I've heard people say, well, there were between lives, maybe you signed a contract of, that,
Or it could be
anything can be.
generational too. Maybe it's within
Well,
families.
there are people in my family, but they don't talk about it. It is,
Wow.
but as you say, the data does show that it's generational. I had a psychic once who told me before I told him about these visits. He told me, and I
Oh,
lied. I said I didn't know what he was talking about. Now, he had told me that before birth, I had lifetimes with these beings, but even before this lifetime, it was an agreement, kind of karmic, that that we will be having our contacts. That feels right to me, because knowing if I was a monk or if I was in religion in other lifetimes, which I'm pretty sure I was, I may have been one of those people who ridiculed people for
hmm.
saying this. I don't know. But here I am risking my own reputation, even though it's more now, it's not as taboo. But I almost lost my job at a church because someone saw me on television talking about this. So it seems that maybe I'm trying to undo, so I don't know, maybe I'm trying to undo something I've done before where
Wow.
I was ridiculing people.
Well, here's the other thing too. I think also, and we've said this too, that we're in a time right now where, you know, we are talking so freely about everything. Whereas 10 years ago, even like, yeah, even 10, 15 years ago, would we even be talking about this as freely as we are now? And I say it's because people are having these experiences. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, people are seeing and experiencing something, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah, consciousness is changing, and it doesn't have to be a UFO. It could be an NDE. You could have a near-death experience.
yep.
I mean, there are many ways to wake up, if you will. I read about a guy who's a therapist, and he was jogging in San Francisco at dawn, and he saw the sun come up, and he said, "Something just came over me. I cannot explain it, but just seeing this beauty and majesty, it changed his life." So it
Wow.
doesn't always have to be as dramatic. It can be
Right.
a divorce. It can be near death. It could be going to war. Something happens, and there's usually some trauma. I mean, I had some trauma because of the frequency and the bizarreness of
I
my
was going to say,
encounters.
how did you deal with that? I mean, that was like that had to be frightening.
It was frightening, and I didn't deal. I dealt with it the best I could, but I went into myself. I didn't tell anybody. I was kind of living a double life.
Okay.
And one day I remember going to a bookstore that used to be in New York down in Soho near Prince Street called the Open Center. And I went there and I'm a voracious reader, so I bought everything I could on UFOs.
Yeah.
And I remember going to pay for it. and I couldn't look the guy in the face, really. I mean, I glanced at him. He was very bizarre looking because he had dreadlocks before they were in,
Okay.
and he had a bald head, but the dreadlocks only came out of the side. So
Wow.
his head was very bizarre. And I felt like a kid, like I was buying condoms or something. I'm looking around, and I put the books up there, and he looked at me and he said, "Man, you look like, you know," and he said, "Is this a hobby or is this for real?" And I said, "It's for real." And he rang everything up, gave me a bag, wrote a name down on a card. He said, "Call that number." And I called, and it was a support group for contactees.
Wow. Wow. So he had some kind of insight
Yes,
into that. Wow.
yes,
I wonder if
yes, yes.
I wonder if there were other people that had come in.
I'm sure of it because when it had to be, but because he sure knew. He put me in contact with this woman. I called. She asked me a few screening questions, and I was there. And there I met Bud Hopkins. Well, he was in another group, but he regressed me. The late
Okay.
Bud Hopkins
Wow.
and
Wow.
the late Gene Mundy, who was
Oh
the first
man.
person who and so that helped me realize that I wasn't insane. That I now then I had to start dealing with it because they kept coming for a while, and I kept not getting sleep. And I mean, even today, it's not as bad, but I have some trauma. It's post traumatic stress. I have
Sure.
when I'm here by myself at night in this house, like when if my wife goes out of town or my daughter's not here. I mean, she lives with her mom, but she
You feel
visits.
like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I close my blinds. I keep the light on, the lamp on in my room until I'm almost
Yeah.
asleep.
No,
But
totally
it's
get
not, yeah, not because they've hurt me. One time they hurt me, but I think it was incidental. But it's because the bizarreness that they can just pop in at any time.
that's wild.
It keeps you hyper vigilant.
And it goes back to, well, I'm reading right now Bud Hopkins' Missing Time book,
Mhm.
and amazing stuff. So you never got any kind of like message per
I
se?
never, no, no. I mean, I got a message. Well, I remember once I was in Boston. I was going to be at I was speaking at an anti-racism training, and they found me in Boston. And a little gray person came into my room. Again, I couldn't move, and in my mind's eye. Now, this was before emojis.
Yeah.
There was a gray, right, pointing at my eyes right here at a pair of hands, like
Wow.
in prayer position,
Yeah.
and in between the hands was a red lightning bolt.
Wow.
And I looked at that, and the emoji was like, "Don't look at me, look at that."
Yeah.
And that was an affirmation because I was already doing, I started doing energy healing. I started doing Reiki, that kind of thing. So
Awesome.
those were messages, and because it was like if I could have always said I don't want to do it. I suppose the message was not so much this is what you got to do, but I cleaned up my act and my life had changed. That was the message.
In the heart of beautiful Bucks County, you'll find Peddler's Village, a village of shopping and dining, a village of family fun, a village of elegance. Visit Peddler's Village today and make memories that last forever.
The other thing, though, is for what purpose? It depends on what the person is going to do after the contact. Remember, this has been going on since the Bible and before.
Wow.
In Mesopotamia and Samaria, and so these beings. This is not new. They had hybrids back then. We have a hybrid program now. The only thing I think is new, well, it's not new, but for 70 plus years, our government has been telling us that these beings don't exist, and what's new is little by little, drip by drip. Uh,
Disclosures coming.
yeah, well, it's already here.
Yeah. You're talking about the orbs before that you had seen when you were a child.
All the time.
We just did a case here in Bucks County where a couple saw a UFO, and then but the woman had a beam of light like the size of her finger. It came right up to her face,
Hmm.
and then it shot away.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I there's a lot of stories like that, and I'm thinking to myself, could that have been something that was maybe that was scanning her to see what she was all about? You know what I'm saying? Could it have
I
been
mean,
some?
it could have been anything. That's the thing. Anything is possible. And so you have more questions than answers. I mean, listen, there's some beings who don't need ships to get here.
Yeah,
Okay, there's
yeah.
some beings who know how to come through portals, and they have bodies and they eat, and they, we our literature tells us about these gods who they made love, they drank, they fought against one another, they got married. Some of these beings don't need bodies, so that's what I was trying to convey. When you admit that, or you come to grips with that, we're not alone, and that the universe is teeming with a diversity of life, just knowing that or accepting that changes
Oh, yeah.
the way you look at life.
Oh, totally. And to have that open mind to all of the possibilities that are out there.
Mhm.